Look around you. What if everything you see, everything you experience, is nothing more than code?
Everything you've ever known, every person you love, every star you've seen in the sky, maybe even your own consciousness, wasn't real. What if it was all just part of an incredibly advanced computer simulation? Now I know, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? But it's a question that some of the world's sharpest physicists and philosophers are taking very, very seriously. So today, let's really dive into the arguments for and against the simulation hypothesis. So let's just put the question right out there, blunt as can be. Is our reality the base reality, the real deal? Or are we, like the hypothesis says, just constructs living inside a program created by some other, much more advanced civilization? It is a truly mind-bending idea. But hey, before you just dismiss it, you should know this isn't some brand new wild theory that just appeared out of nowhere. Humanity has actually been wrestling with this question for a very long time. Just take a look at this. I mean, way back. Over 2,000 years ago, you had Plato talking about prisoners in a cave who thought shadows on a wall were the entire world. Around the same time, the Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly. When he woke up, he couldn't be sure. Was he a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly? Or was he a butterfly now dreaming he was a man? Fast forward to the 17th century, and you've got René Descartes worrying about an evil demon tricking all of his senses. And then, of course, in 1999, The Matrix came along and turned this entire philosophical debate into this massive cultural phenomenon. But the modern version of this argument, well, that got supercharged by one very specific paper. In 2003, this philosopher, Nick Bostrom, published a paper that laid out what he calls the simulation argument. And look, it's not a proof that we're in a simulation. Instead, it's this incredibly clever logical puzzle, a trilemma. That means it presents three possibilities, and he argues that one of them is almost certainly true. But before we get to the trilemma itself, let's get on the same page about what we're even talking about. Okay, so the core idea is pretty straightforward. It's that our entire universe, from the tiniest quantum particle all the way up, is a computer-generated reality. Now, for this to work, you have to make one crucial assumption, that consciousness doesn't need a squishy biological brain. It can pop up in any system that has the right kind of computational structure. Basically, the mind is like a very, very complex computer program. And if a simulation is detailed enough, the conscious beings inside it, well, they'd have no idea. To them, their reality would feel completely 100% real. So, this is it. This is Bostrom's trilemma broken down. He says one of these three statements has to be true. Option 1, extinction. Basically, civilizations like ours almost always wipe themselves out before they ever get post-human. Before they get the insane computing power needed to run these kinds of simulations. Option 2, disinterest. Advanced civilizations could run these simulations, but for whatever reason, maybe they think it's unethical, maybe it's just boring, almost none of them ever do. Or option 3, simulation. If the first two are false, that means advanced civilizations do make tons of these simulations. And because there would be billions of simulated worlds for every one real world, the odds are absolutely overwhelming that we're in one of them. And here's the real kicker. Bostrom himself doesn't say which of the three he thinks is true. As he puts it right here, given how little we know, we should probably treat each of these possibilities as being roughly equally likely. Now just stop and think about that for a second. It means either humanity is pretty much doomed, or all advanced life across the entire universe decides not to run simulations, or we're almost certainly living in one right now. There's really no comfortable fourth option there. So if this is a real possibility, how on earth could we ever know? Could there be clues, maybe some glitches in the Matrix, hidden in the source code of our universe? This is where the whole idea moves from just philosophy into some really speculative physics, with scientists actually starting to look for hints that our reality is, being computed. I love this quote from a Reddit user because it sums up the core feeling perfectly. The idea is that if our universe is a simulation running on some finite computer system, it would have to use shortcuts to save on processing power. And some physicists argue that when you look really, really closely at the laws of physics, that's exactly what you see, a system that seems designed for efficiency. So let's look at these clues. In the quantum world, particles don't even have definite properties until we measure them. That's superposition. Well, couldn't that be a processing shortcut? It's like a video game that only renders the part of the world the player is actually looking at. Why bother calculating a particle's state if no one's observing it? And then there's the speed of light, a universal speed limit. Why should there be one? Well, in a computer, there's always a processor speed limit. We also have something called the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space, which you could almost think of as the pixel of our universe. Reality isn't infinitely smooth, it seems to be digitized at its very core. And all of this leads to this bigger idea called digital physics. It basically suggests that at the deepest, most fundamental level, reality isn't made of matter and energy, but of information, bits, simple yes or no questions. And if that's true, then the universe isn't just like a computer, it is a computer. And if it's computable, well, that also means it's simulatable. The point is, all the weirdness we see in quantum mechanics might not be so weird after all. It might just be the signature of a system trying to optimize its own performance. Okay, that is a pretty compelling story, but as you can probably guess, there are some very powerful counter-arguments. A lot of scientists are deeply skeptical, and honestly, they have some really good reasons for thinking this whole thing is, as one cosmologist put it, just late-night pub discussion. Nobel Prize winner Frank Wilczek brings up this fantastic objection. He says our universe actually seems incredibly inefficient from a programming standpoint. The laws of physics have all this messy, hidden complexity that doesn't really seem to do anything useful. If you were a programmer trying to make a convincing simulation, you'd write clean, efficient code. You wouldn't bury all these extra complicated rules deep inside the physics for no apparent reason. Our universe, he's basically saying, looks a lot more like a messy, natural reality than a cleanly designed simulation. And there are other huge criticisms too. A really big one is that the whole idea is unfalsifiable. I mean, how could you ever prove it's false? If you find a weird glitch, believers can just say, see, proof. But if you don't find anything, they can just say, well, the simulation is just really, really good. Since you can't disprove it, some people call it pseudoscience, others say it's self-defeating. Like, if we create our own simulations, are our simulators also in a simulation and so on forever? And then there's just this simple, common sense objection. Why would some super advanced civilization waste this colossal amount of energy on this? Wouldn't they have better things to do? So we have these compelling arguments on both sides of the fence. But for a minute, let's just set aside the if and ask, so what? I mean, what if it is true? What would that actually mean for us, for the meaning of our lives, and for the nature of whoever or whatever created us? This is where the whole conversation takes another really fascinating turn. This brings us to a really compelling ethical argument. Just think about the long road a civilization would have to travel to even get to the point of creating these simulations. They'd have to survive what some thinkers call the Great Filter, all those existential risks like nuclear war, runaway AI, you name it. And the argument goes that the only civilizations that could possibly make it through that gauntlet are ones that develop incredibly advanced ethical systems. Reckless, destructive civilizations would just burn themselves out long before they could ever become our simulators. This idea completely flips the script on the stories we usually tell. We often imagine our simulators are like bored teenagers playing a cosmic video game, or maybe cruel gods punishing us. But this ethical argument suggests those motives are just unstable. A civilization that runs simulations for cruel entertainment probably isn't the kind of cooperative, stable society that lasts for millions of years. Instead, the only stable and efficient motives would be things like education, maybe to learn about their own past, or scientific problem solving. This would mean our simulators, if they exist, are probably a lot more like cosmic scientists than cosmic gamers. Which, of course, brings us to the ultimate question. If this simulation is so perfect that you can't tell the difference between it and a base reality, does the distinction even matter? The pain you feel is real pain. The joy you feel is real joy. The love you have for people is real love. If the only reality you will ever know is this one, then for all intents and purposes, it is real. Some philosophers argue that learning you're in a simulation shouldn't change a single thing about how you live your life or what you value. And that is the final thought I really want to leave you with. Let's forget the physics and the probabilities for just a moment and think about the personal side of this. If a little pop-up window appeared in your vision right now and confirmed 100% that this is all a simulation, what would you do next? Would you try to find the programmers, try to break the code, or would you just close the window and get on with living your life, finding meaning in the only world you will ever know?